On the evening of Sunday the 12th of October 1941, more than 300 bombers took off from airfields across England. It was to be the greatest British air attack of the war so far. Their targets? Armament factories in Nuremberg and Bremen. Of the 99 aircraft ordered to bomb Bremen, there was just one of the new Handley Page Halifaxes, the four-engined bomber introduced only a year before. The plane was Halifax L9561 of 76 Squadron, based at RAF Middleton St in County Durham. Its 8-strong crew was experienced but young. The Canadian pilot, Sgt Elmer Muttart, was just 23 years old. In this film, we recount the events of that night. We learn about the unique strengths and weaknesses of the Halifax itself, the skills of the engineers and ground crew who prepared the planes ready for action night after night. We get an impression of what life was like for the men and women stationed at Middleton St George. We follow the journey of L9561 over the North Sea into danger in the skies above Friesland in the Netherlands. And we learn of the remarkable heroism displayed by its young pilot. Is heroism and self-sacrifice, because this was to be the last flight of Halifax L9561. From 1940, as Britain's unequal struggle against Nazi Germany intensified, the role of RAF bombers was critical. But the small twin-engined aircraft available to the RAF at the outset of the war, such as the Blenheim, the Wellington and the Whitley, were insufficient for the task of doing serious damage to Germany's manufacturing capability. So in spring 1941, when the Handley Page Company launched the Halifax, it was heralded as a game changer.
Among the heavy-type bombers carrying the RAF attack into the heart of Germany is the Halifax, a four-engine giant of bomber command, now being turned out in considerable numbers for the Ministry of Aircraft Production by the Handley Page Company, prominent since the last war for its heavy aircraft. Strong defensive armament is provided by 3 bolt and pawl gun turrets, one in the nose, one amidship, and the other astern, which is known as the glass house for tail end Charlie, the rear gunner. Behind her bomb doors, the Halifax can store away a maximum bomb load of 5.5 tons, which gives this monster a fully loaded weight of 27 tons. The machine has an exceptional takeoff despite its great size and weight. When the throttles open up her 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the Halifax is rapidly airborne even under heavy overload conditions. Her maximum range is approximately 3,000 miles. Half that distance is still a long way into Mr. Hitler's country. Halifax bombers have long given heavy knocks and will go on dishing them out as we give Germany bombing raids on a bigger scale than she has ever handed out to us.
Lord Halifax was present at the christening of this huge Halifax bomber, one of the type that is dropping heavy stuff on Germans in Germany and elsewhere. Lady Halifax performed the ceremony. After that, we can have a good look at the newborn giant. 99-foot wingspan, 22 feet high, 70 feet long.
'76 Squadron was an early adopter of the new aircraft, taking delivery of its first Halifaxes in May 1941. This squadron was to carry out more bombing operations with Halifaxes than any other, flying the plane on raids until the very end of the war. But the price they paid was to be high. 787 crew members were killed or declared missing in action. 278 airmen were shot down and taken as prisoners of war. The crew of Halifax L9561 counted amongst the squadron's long list of casualties. On the night of October the 12th, 1941, the aircraft boasted a full 8-strong crew of seasoned airmen. Despite their comparative youth, Between them, they had over 90 sorties under their belt. Firstly with 78 Squadron in Whitley bombers, then in 76 Squadron's Halifaxes. Born in Oxford, 20-year-old tail gunner John Duffield joined the RAF in the spring of 1940. In mid-September 1941, he survived a perilous sortie over Brest when his plane had come under heavy enemy fire and returned to base with 10 shell holes in its bomb doors. Air gunner and second radio operator George Patterson was born in Doncaster and was the first of the crew to fly with 76 Squadron. He joined up in November 1939 and at 29 was the most senior crew member. Dublin-born Bill Hunt, 22, the first of the crew to fly from Middleton St George, was first radio operator and air gunner. He enlisted in January 1940 and, as his commanding officer described, was a great favourite with everyone in the squadron. 25-year-old Leslie Roberts, born in Harwich, was the second flight engineer. He'd entered the RAF as a 15-year-old apprentice in 1931. Another long-serving RAF man, David Kotzel, born in Gillingham, was first flight engineer. He'd signed up as a 15-year-old in 1935. This operation was to be David's first and only flight in a Halifax. The flight observer, Reg Alexander, was born in London but had enlisted in Belfast, where his family had moved. He joined up in September 1939 as soon as war broke out, and had already flown 14 missions with his friend Elmer Muttart, the aircraft's pilot. Born in Hackney, the only married crew member, 21-year-old Norman Traylor, had left work as an accounting clerk in July 1940 to qualify as an RAF pilot within a year. This was also to be his only Halifax operation. Nicknamed Happy, the pilot, 23-year-old Elmer Muttart, hailed from Cape Travis on Canada's Prince Edward Island. A baseball-playing sports enthusiast and recent graduate, he volunteered for the Royal Canadian Air Force in November 1939. Praised by his superior officers as a good type, polite, gentlemanly, deliberate, good nerves, and intelligent, Elmer transferred to the RAF, where he qualified as a pilot and took part in 19 dangerous air raids over Germany before piloting the operation on October the 12th, 1941.
In common with most aircraft of this time, you know, the bomb symbols, each one represents a sortie. The yellow ones are night operations and the white ones are daylight.
And this particular plane has been restored?
Oh yes, it's built in the image of Friday the 13th, which did exist.
Okay.
Right, yes, it was based at Lisset near Bridlington.
Okay.
And it did 128 ops.
Wow.
Which was more than any other.
Pretty good going, isn't it?
It was indeed, yes, yeah. Especially when you consider that initially it was considered unlucky because it's for Freddie, as it was those days, Foxtrot now, and the squadron had lost 8 in 12 months.
Right.
So the word on the squadron was, for Freddie, bad news, keep away.
Right, okay. And the squadron was?
158.
158.
Yeah. But then, it started ops and kept going, and ultimately everyone wanted to fly it because it always came in.
It got luckier. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those were the original engines for the Halifax, the Hercules?
Yes, these are Bristol Hercules engines, which were on the Mark III, which this is.
Right.
The early ones had Merlins.
Which Dad would have had, I think.
Series 1 aircraft, 41.
Yeah.
He was with the 76 Squadron.
Right, yeah.
Back up at Middleton, which we've just been to have a look.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Have a look at it, yeah.
Yeah, there's much left.
Well, the officers' mess is...
It's now a
made into
hotel.
now.
Oh, right.
So we were able to have a look
And they've got a
around
few bit of memorabilia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great, very, very evocative.
Yeah. It's an aircraft which will do almost anything that's needed doing. Unlike the Lancaster, which is an out-and-out bomber.
Yeah, I mean,
This will pull gliders.
Yeah.
It'll pull 3 gliders
Yeah.
at once. You know, apart from being a bomber,
yeah.
it'll take agents into Europe,
Yeah.
drop supplies to people in Europe, hunt U-boats, met flights out into the Atlantic, 10 and 12 hours. You'll need it doing,
Yeah.
and the Halifax
There was an
will do it.
all-purpose. Yeah.
All purpose. It was designed as. So what I'll do, I'll point out some of the external
Yeah,
features,
excellent.
and then we'll take a look inside at some of the more interesting
fantastic.
parts. One or two odds and ends out here. These are lead weights here in this tube, and it's the end of the high-frequency radio aerial. So when Sparks wants to use that, he unwinds it and it trails out behind the aircraft.
That's what Dad would be.
That's what Dad would have done.
Yeah. And he must remember to recover it as well, because if he loses it, it comes out of his money. Oh yeah. And it could do damage as well. You know, it weighs 1.25 pounds, but you know, if it hits a chimney pot, it won't come off second best. So as I mentioned, these are Hercules engines. The others were Merlins. It should have had these on from the start, but Handley Page were told no. They're in short supply, you'll have to have Merlins. Designers were delighted about that, of course, because they had to alter the wings. But anyway, it was only when it got these on, it became the aircraft it should have been at the beginning, because now it's quicker than the Lancaster. It'll climb quicker. Didn't have as big a bomb load, because, as I mentioned earlier, it's for a variety of roles. So the bomb bay is relatively shallow. So the maximum capacity bombs is 13,000 pounds, which that's how it started, that's how it finished, 13,000 pounds. It did carry, apart from the main bomb bay, bombs in the wings. It would carry 3 500-pounders in each wing, the inner wings here. Fully enclosed bomb bays, doors. And the main bomb bay, we'll take a walk now, from there. Down to here.
So that would have opened.
That would all have opened, yes. The large bulge under here houses a radar scanner,
Okay.
which is H2S, which I'm sure you have heard of. Looks straight down. Yeah, very good at identifying water. So coastlines, rivers and so forth, they show up very clearly on the display. So it's primarily for navigation.
And that would have always been on that bit of technology, would have been on the early Halifaxes as well.
Not initially.
Yeah.
The early ones had a gun there.
Yes. Well, we've got a picture. That there definitely is a gun there.
Yes, yeah. It was a retractable, a Pearson Green turret.
Yeah.
It was retractable.
Right.
And when they needed that, they had this. Because the Germans, of course, developed the night fighter with the upward firing cannon. Couldn't see them. They slid underneath. Bang. And it was only recently I learned from a German that they were operated by infrared. All he had to do was fly the aircraft into the right position underneath and the guns fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could have done with the original gun.
Yes, they could, yeah. One of the Canadians from around here said, we cut that away, we sat a guy in there with a .5. We didn't have any bother with those upward firing cannons. Yeah. So from here we'll have a look at Tail End Charlie down here.
It was a risky place to be.
Yes.
So that would rotate right out in flight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he would get out that way if he'd got to abandon the aircraft. So he'd revolve it to this position.
And how does he control that movement there? How would he do
With a
that?
stick. Side to side rotates the turret. There's a squeeze on the other side. That'll make it rotate faster. Forward and back, guns go up and down. When he pushes it forward, guns go down, seat comes up, so that his eye stays in line with gun sight.
Yeah. So unprotected.
Completely.
And I believe, I may be right or wrong, that this was the most risky crew member. I mean, they were really vulnerable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because your attack generally is going to come
Come
from
from
the
behind.
Yes. Yeah.
So you see it first and get it
Well,
first.
yes. Yeah. That's why he can never relax,
No.
because he's got to call the skipper to corkscrew one way or the other
No.
to dodge the fighter coming in. Yeah. And he's travelling backwards, so right's left and left's right. When he calls the skipper to corkscrew, left is right.
Yeah. Get that right.
Yeah, and there's no time to think about that.
No.
It's got to be instinctive.
Yeah.
No time, there's no time for anything. That's why some of them would take out the centre panel of the perspex, so that it had a clear view.
Okay.
It's no good thinking, is that too late. Too late. He's coming in, he's got 20mm cannon, range 1,000 yards. He's coming in at speed, your range is 600 with these.
The duration of a flight, what was the extent that they could be out?
Could be 4 hours,
Okay.
France. Could be 10, Milan.
So there was enough fuel capacity for 10 hours?
The way you do it, full fuel and a reduced bomb. So there. And this one, of course, has the modified tail section, because the early one, it was cut away like that, top and bottom. It was more triangular. And there was a problem with the handling of the Halifax from its inception because of that.
Because of the cutaway?
Yeah. Major Cords, who was the chief test pilot, he identified this difficulty initially, and it had to go into service, you know, and it went in with this suspicion, and it proved that under extreme circumstances you could get what's known as rudder stall. In other words, the rudders are hard over, having no effect, and you could lose control of the aircraft. Eventually that was cured by changing the design, the shape of the fin, so this is 50% bigger. The first production models had gunners back here. There were hatches here, like a B-17. So there were 2 gunners there and no mid-upper.
Okay. So what year was that? 39 or?
Yeah, when it came into service.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't. We thought this was Bill's, but actually he's in the picture. So that was L9530.
Yes. Yeah, with the different fins.
Yeah, so they're cutaways,
Yes,
as you said.
got away Merlin engines and gun turret at the front.
So he hasn't got the gun, because we've said...
It was retractable.
Oh, okay, the gun turret was pulled
Yeah.
back. Okay. And apparently the pilot here was one of the Cheshire
Cheshire
brother.
family.
Was the younger brother?
Yeah, I think it was a younger brother.
Yeah.
The Cheshire. But dad is here. That's from Picture Post. Nice photo, isn't it?
It is. So I'll check the door first, then invite you to follow me. So this is the ammunition for the rear turret, located here. So you have 8 boxes, 500 rounds in each box, and it's fed into the tracks here and travels down to the turret. So on takeoff, the boxes are full, obviously, the tracks are preloaded, so you have in the region of 10,000 rounds in total, which is enough for 2 minutes. Mid-upper, he has 1,000 rounds per gun, and his ammunition will be attached to the side of the turret. This area here is officially known as the rest bay. It's the safest part of the aircraft because you have the main wing spar there and the rear wing spar here. Bracing at each corner There's a joint in the fuselage here, similarly there's one there. On takeoff, should things go wrong and it starts to break up, you have in effect a safety cell here. It's crew positions for takeoff, landing, crash landing, emergence, ditching.
At what point of the flight would you not be in position then? I mean, wouldn't it be in the gun position all the time?
Takeoff and landing. And if you remember, it's designed for multi-role, so you could accommodate passengers if necessary. You know, the SLE ones taking agents into
they're
Europe.
dropping people, yeah.
They were dropping people, yeah. They were configured slightly differently in as much as behind the mid-upper turret there was a hole in the floor and it was cone-shaped, normally covered of course in flight, but they would go through there. At 10,000 feet you go on oxygen. It's an oxygen economiser, and if you're in here for example, then you plug into there. If then you need to move about the aircraft, you would take that. I understand they weren't always full. Because being young and high-spirited, and you've been out the night before,
You used it for the hangover?
it's wonderful for playing.
Clearing the hangover?
Yes. And being a luxury aeroplane, we've got central heating. Ducted around the crew quarters, it's hot air from the inboard engines. We've got a pigeon here. Should we get shot down in the drink, then with a lot of navigators got some idea where you are. Wireless operator, he'll put the position on the slip, attach it to its leg, and off it goes. His next task is to evade the Hawks, which the Germans kept along the coastline. We shot them on our coastline. So he gets back and hopefully they'll let him look for him.
That would have been Bill's responsibility as well. It's the wireless operator.
Yes. There was one crew, he said, we were on U-boat patrol on Biscay, he said, and I had it on auto, and we were happily cruising along. Suddenly, we're planning. I got all of it recovered and said to the co-pilot, that's peculiar. You know, shouldn't have done that. Seems all right now. A minute or two later, it's diving. Right, okay, I've got it. Okay, well, it's faulty, isn't it? There's a problem here. The navigator appeared. Skip, Sparks has got the pigeon out. He said, and he can't catch it. He's trying to get, he's up and down the aircraft. And of course that changed the centre of gravity.
Excellent. This is Bill's seat.
Best seat in the house.
So he would stay here for the whole flight. He didn't have any other duties.
Somewhere trained there was a dual role. Principally, you would be a wireless operator, but you could be a gunner if necessary.
And what duties would he perform for the pilot then?
He'd be listening for any late instructions, for example, changes in wind. strength or direction, which of course is vital for the navigator to know. In the early stages, there was a trained observer. Now the observer would do navigation, a bit of radio, bomb aiming. We have the navigator here. And then looking at some of his kit. This is the G-box, there'd be a display here. This is a receiver, this display would be here. There's some lines on there, and the navigator has a chart. And he looks at that and he matches those lines with this particular section of lines on his chart, and that'll tell him where he is. That's in the most simple terms. It's line of sight. The further you get away from the transmitters, the weaker the signal. And the Germans know all about this. They know what frequency it operates on, so they try and jam it. Navigators call it grass because you get a solid green bar at the bottom of the display. As the signal weakens, you turn up the gain, the grass grows and blanks off your display. But he's also got something else up his sleeve, well, above his head. There's a roll of film in here with all the stars on it, so he can select which portion of the sky he wants and project that onto his plot, so he can use astro navigation using the stars. That's a real plot, because at the end of the war some of the crews did what they called cook's tours, and what it was, they'd take their ground crew out to show them where they'd been and what they'd done.
So this was after the...
This was after
the war,
when
right?
it finished, yeah. Map's red because the lighting is red, so it shows up, and red of course is relaxing for the eyes in the dark. He's got another device here, the variation setting corrector, which is sometimes known as the air position indicator. The variation it's correcting is the difference between true north and magnetic north. The other point about the Halifax is that in the early days they had a tail warning radar. It was a system called Monica, and if Monica detected something approaching from behind, it would beep in the whole crew's headphones. And as it got nearer, the frequency of the beeps increased. That's okay to start with, but as we progress, I mean, we get to the stage where we've got hundreds of aircraft in the air. There's always some. So, you know, you're tense, you know, and suddenly beep, beep, oh God. Oh, relax, it's all right. And then shortly after the same again. So, oh, turn the bloody thing off. He, of course, is plotting here always some time ahead, where we need to be in so many minutes or so. While the bomb aimer is looking out there for any significant waypoints, which he'll say, right, I've seen this. The navigator will say, yeah, that's okay. I was expecting that. Or,
Blimey, where are we?
well, we just passed that. No, there's something wrong here. You know, either we've got a tailwind or whatever. Recalculate. So he's doing this, and of course it's noisy. It's not exactly smooth. It vibrates. There could be another distraction if they come under attack, and then suddenly the pilot takes evasive action. Right, now where are we going? You know, what heading is this? What speed are we doing? How long are we holding this? Where are we now? Now then, what course do I need to get back on track? What speed do we need to maintain to keep time on target? So, stress.
So
Yes.
this is pre-computer. You had to do it in your own brain, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. So,
Are they communicating by shouting, or is it through radio?
no, intercom.
It is an intercom.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, they're on the intercom.
So presumably they all hear what's
Yeah.
being said wherever you are in the plane. But
Yeah.
presumably only certain people are supposed to talk, because it's kind of everybody contributing.
Yes, yeah. You call up, for example, skipper, nav here, you know, we need to change course now to 230.
Hello, skipper. Hello, navigator. Half a minute to go. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, keep weaving, Cam. There's quite a lot of light stuff coming up as well, falling off a bit low.
Hello, engineer. Skipper here. Yeah? Will you put the revs up, please? Yeah?
Okay, keep weaving. Left. Bomb doors open.
Hello, Bombardier. Okay, when you are.
Bomb doors open.
Bomb doors open, Bombardier.
Steady. Steady. Bomb's going.
Hey, Jimmy, try to behind us.
Bomb sediment.
Where is he, Red Gunner? Can you see him? Down! Down! He's come down! He's come down! Can you shoot him down? Yeah. He's got him fine. Right in the middle. Bloody good. Bloody good.
Right about Takeoff. Keep waving.
Okay, don't shout all at once.
Right about Takeoff.
Okay, photograph taken. Hello, Skipper. Will you turn on to 081? Right, 081, navigator. Don't all speak at once now. Keep quiet, it's okay. Okay. Hello, mid-gunner.
So that's the navigator, and here we have the bomb aimer. And this is his computer. So the height, course and speed of the aircraft are fed into here automatically. This procedure is called levelling. Bomb aimer inputs the wind direction, the wind strength, the barometric pressure at the target and the terminal velocity of his bombs. And that's all fed to the bomb site here. So he turns it on, opens it, and this device is a collimator that projects an orange cross onto the glass slide. That's the aiming point. So the bomb aimer lies out on here.
He's lying flat out here.
Yeah, except some of them said I crouched. So he's looking through them until the cross coincides with the aiming point. In the time-honored fashion, he presses the bomb release. That doesn't do what you think it does. That sets the Mickey Mouse going. This is a Mickey Mouse. Its real name is a bomb distributor, but among aircrew it's universally known as a Mickey Mouse. When it presses the release, there's a rotor arm here, and it sets that going, and a series of contacts here. Each time it touches a contact, a bomb is released, and it can vary the speed.
Would he be anticipating when the cross is over the...
No.
It's exactly
it's
when
all
it's on
built
the...
into the...
So that time lapse is already worked out.
Yeah.
Automatically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, this is crucial because on the way to the target and approaching the target, the skipper has been weaving and varying his height to try and stop the radar locking on. While the bomb aimer is doing his levelling with this, he's got to fly straight and level. On the bomb run, you're obviously flying straight and level under instruction from here. You release your bombs and you continue flying straight and level. Now, this is suicide because the flak is radar guided. It's all fed into the guns, your height, course and speed, and they blaze away. You hold and hold and hold until the bombs impact, the photo flash goes off and the camera under there takes the picture, then you can brake.
So how long is that?
Well, it depends on your height. It could be half a minute, but it would seem forever. Really would.
Yeah, because you're absolutely vulnerable during that period.
Yeah. You can only vary that if you come under direct attack from, say, a fighter. But if you don't get the picture, you haven't been.
If you didn't bring back the evidence, what would be disciplinary action?
No telling, but it doesn't count as a sortie. There's one of the Canadians who was based around here, Eastmoor, it's not too far away. he said to me, our CEO summoned the whole squadron. I want the whole lot of you in, right, at such and such a time. And we thought, hello, what's all this? Don't like the sound of this. So they assembled there, and the CEO walks in, stands up there. Pay attention. Now listen. If I see one more bombing picture taken from an oblique angle, that crew will go back next day on their own and do it again. Understood? Dismiss.
Does it mean they were turning
Yeah.
before they were
Yeah.
before the photo?
Yeah. And this is the flight engineer's department here. He's got 12 fuel tanks. There are 6 in each wing. So here we have 12 fuel gauges, there's cylinder head, there's oil pressures and temperatures. You can start the aircraft from here. And fuel management is an important part of his duty, because you've got to burn it in a proper sequence to keep the aircraft balanced. Use tanks 1 and 3, which are the inboard ones. You burn 80 gallons, that will be 8 out of each. Then you have to switch tanks. You've got to go back to the rest bay because the transfer cocks are under the seats. So he goes back there, sets the transfer cocks up, comes back here, operates the pumps, checks how much is used, writes it in his logbook and tells the skipper. Approaching the target, you want your fuel here, not out there. So it's back onto 1 and 3. So it's back there, back here, in the book, tell him. Clearing the target, you come off 1 and 3, back onto the intermediates, top up 1 and 3, back there, back here, in the book, tell him. So
He's back here. It's
yeah,
constant.
constant. Similarly, on approach, coming into land, you want the fuel in here, so it's back onto 1 and 3. Now obviously it's not as quick as that, but nevertheless that's what it has to use. It has to do. The other thing, although he's got a seat here which he could sit and look backwards, no one sat down, they would stand, because he knows everything about the aircraft, how it's constructed, he knows the fuel systems, the control systems. So if there's any sort of a problem or some damage, the skipper will say, right, go on, what is it, find out, I want to know. So he's a busy man, the flight engineer. And then we've got the skipper here, irrespective of rank, he's in charge.
How much training would they have got?
9 months, flight engineer.
Because that's quite intense, isn't it? What
It is, yes.
As compared to
the
a
pilot, he would have less, wouldn't he?
2 years.
Oh, would he?
Really?
Start to finish.
Even at the height of the war? When
Start to finish, yeah.
But how did they do that at the start of the war? Because nobody knew it was going to happen.
Well, no, but you know, if you look at videos and all film clips, they're all fairly well-to-do people, and a lot of them have flying experience, although converting from something like that into something like this is...
they wouldn't have been on this sort of
No.
aeroplane.
You ab initio training where you've got to do so many hours daylight, so many at night, so many night landings, cross countries, then you graduate to multi-engine, that's twin engine, because that's a different kettle of fish altogether when you've got 2 engines. So again, you build up from that and eventually on to an operational conversion or a heavy conversion unit, then an operational conversion unit where you're taught to use it in combat.
This is a very complex machine.
Indeed, yes,
So-
yes. That's why you need a specialist in each position.
After about 7 weeks, I think, at Dishboard. We were then posted to Middleton St George.
Throughout the 1930s, in preparation for war, hundreds of new airfields were constructed along the English east coast. Among them, built on the site of Goosepool Farm in County Durham, was Middleton St George, the base for 76 and 78 squadrons. This was the most northerly of the RAF's new aerodromes. "95-year-old Stan Instone, the sole surviving airman who'd been stationed at Middleton St George at that time, takes up the story.
At first, we're not in the main camp, just outside the main gate. There was some knitting huts, and I think there were about 3 weeks, in there. And then after about 3 weeks, we were then to permanent sergeant's mess hut, which is brick built. It was a very comfortable place. There was no bar, there was no alcohol in at least there was in the officers' mess, but of course, as a sergeant, we were not allowed in there. It was just soft drinks. Facilities within the camp was pretty Spartan, actually, because it was right alongside the railway line. Whatever chance we got, we went into either Stockton or Darlington.
Just a short train journey from the base, the local towns offered the chance to relax. Air and ground crew members could spend their limited free time at the pubs, the dance hall, or the pictures. Just down the road from the officers' mess, the other ranks could enjoy a pint at the Oak Tree pub, or the Twig, as it was affectionately nicknamed. Ground crew at Middleton St George included 370 male staff, or airfields as they were known, along with 56 members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, who were separately accommodated in a fenced-off compound.
Now there's your plug and lead. Right, thank you. Operations tonight, fellas.
How do you know?
Oh, I'll get around, I'll get all the gen.
Hey, Conley, what's the odds today?
Wait a minute, I'll tell you. Kill Wilhelmshaven and the Channel Port, 2-1. Gelsenkirchen, 7-1. Hamburg and Cologne, 8-1. All others, 10.
I'll have a 10 on the Channel Port.
Okay, you're on.
In the morning, I used to go out to the aircraft itself, to have a chat with the ground crew.
Between them, they had all the necessary skills to prepare, maintain and repair the planes. Engineers, fitters, riggers, electricians, refuelers, drivers, as well as reserved occupation civilians like technical specialists, cooks and cleaners, comprised a fully self-sufficient team. In the early years of the war, Halifax bombers were fitted with Merlin 20 engines. They were of a complex design, reliable to fly but challenging to maintain. For example, they combined the head and block in a sealed unit. The engines burned inferior quality 80-octane fuel, so burned-out valves were common and very tricky to replace. The plane's needle blade propellers were crafted in wood and then coated in Jablo plastic resin composite. Sub-zero temperatures at high altitude frequently caused cracks in the laminate. The crew had to inspect each propeller meticulously.
What's up? Morning, Corporal. Here's today's orders. A and B flights to be operational. C for Charlie and R for Robert incendiaries. Rest 4 500s and 1,000 pounder.
What time takeoff, sir?
Around 7:30.
Very good, sir.
Oh, and there's a camera on you for Uncle. That'll mean a flash bomb.
6 1,000s and 3 cams, the same positions.
Every day, the senior engineer or chiefy would lead team briefings, specifying operational requirements and allocating tasks. Depending on the demands of the operation, the Halifaxes carried bomb loads of between 250 and 4,000 pounds. To manage fuel capacity, the further the plane was to fly, the fewer bombs it was able to carry. Each load comprised incendiary as well as explosive bombs. In many instances, the incendiaries were more effective against the target than conventional explosives. The bombs were safely stored on the base, unfused until required. On the day of an operation, they were transported to the shed to be fused and sealed with steel wire. It was only after they were loaded on board the aircraft that the seals were released and the bombs were ready to do their job. When the crew took off, they were effectively aboard a flying bomb. And they were under strict orders never to return to base with live bombs on board. If they failed to hit their target, they had to shed their bomb load over the open sea. The Halifaxes flew with as much as 2,500 gallons of fuel.
Which turret do these gun barrels go, Jimmy? Front or rear?
They're for the rear turret, Phil. I'll be down in a minute.
Okay.
All details of the operation were top secret, but based on the volume of fuel they were ordered to pump, the refueling crews enjoyed placing bets on the likely target of each flight. Although the ground crew preferred to work in the open air, relying on less than stable tripods and winches to lift heavy engines, major refits demanded the heavy-duty cranes available in the hangars. Each flight had a specific sequence of shells loaded for each gun, including incendiary and armor-piercing bullets. The guns fitted to the early Halifaxes fired 303 shells, 3 inches long and 5 grams in weight. The 303s were widely regarded as pea shooters compared with the more powerful guns used by the Luftwaffe.
What's the target, Sarge?
Just me, boy, I don't know.
Are those barrels for F for Freddy gone over yet?
They've gone over, Sarge.
Okay.
131.6, 19.6.
Accurate weather forecasting was mission critical.
131.5, 18.5.
Wind is 22 miles an hour at 309 degrees.
Visibility 12 miles, 3 times the cumulus cloud at 3,000 feet.
Distances between the sergeant's mess and whatever was quite a distance actually, and we all had bikes. The wireless operator and myself, good buddies as it were, we shared a room in the sergeant's mess. And I always went in the aircraft itself just to check, especially the escape hatch. I always made a point of making sure the escape hatch was easy to open or close whatever. You were free until such time. Now, the battle order usually came out about 11 and 12 o'clock.
There was always a warm welcome for air crews at Gladys's Hotel, the canteen run by local ladies. Crew members enjoyed an all-day breakfast menu of eggs, bangers, bacon and strong tea before an operation.
Invariably it was a night raid, so you just went back to the billet and got your head down and then had a meal.
Led by the wing commander and squadron leader, the afternoon briefing gave details of the upcoming night's operations to all on-duty airmen.
Sit down, please. You're on to a new target tonight. Now I'll describe the target to you. I'll say some more afterwards. Put out the lights. This is your target. Principal feature is the accumulation of oil wagons on the sidings and barges on the river. Other landmarks are the railway to the south of the canal with the bridge over the river half a mile south of the target. You can get your target maps from the clerk outside the door afterwards. As soon as the Hun knows that you found the target, you'll get the usual plentiful supply of flak. So there's no good expecting an easy passage because you won't get one. Remember, don't risk aircraft unnecessarily. Your main object is to bomb the target and then to bring your aircraft back safely. What's the armament officer got to say?
Not much, sir. You'll find your bomb load written up there. One of the bombs in each aircraft is a delayed action. That is, with the exception of C and R.
Right, what's the weatherman got to tell us this time?
Well, the weather should be favourable. Cloud increasing across the North Sea, but with breaks in it. Good visibility. Navigational winds northwest to 30 miles an hour at all heights. Risk of fog at base aerodrome towards dawn. The charts you can see upstairs afterwards.
Rancor. How about signals?
Wireless operators will get the call signs for tonight from me in my office.
You wish to say that? Yeah.
Well, chaps, no doubt about it, we've got a good one for tonight. It should be fairly easy to find, and with those water landmarks and the light, you should manage a good run up. Go in and flatten it, and good luck to you.
Raids were called work. They were meticulously written up in the operations record book, which detailed the flight date, aircraft type and number, along with the names of crew members, the target, the departure and return times, and the information from the crew's debriefing.
After the briefing, you went to the parachute store, got your parachute and so forth. The earlier air crews, they had flying clothing. We were issued with 2 flying suits, an inner and an outer. On our first stop, we wore this there because it was too hot and too bulky. The gunners obviously had theirs, outer, inner, and electrically heated clothes, suit, etc. But the rest of us just had an ordinary battle dress with our great long pullovers, frocks. C, airmen for the use of, actually. It came down to your knees, this sort of thing. You usually wear long john. We found that it was adequate for normal battle dress. The only trouble is later found if you had to leave the aircraft in mid-air, you found that your clothing was not adequate, and which we did, of course. And then you were picked up by a truck or a bus or whatever and taken to dispersal, and then you just waited around until such times it was time for engine start up and stuff like that.
Each crew member was given a flask of hot soup or coffee and a round of jam sandwiches to sustain them on the flight. Jam sandwiches had the advantage of not freezing at high altitudes.
So the preparation was, the pilot and I would go right round the aircraft checking this, that and the other. When start-up time came, we had to get into the aircraft. The wireless hub would check his wireless, obviously. The gunner rotated their turrets and made sure everything worked that way. The navigator would get all his gear out on his navigating table. He just sort of sat around. You were very tense, actually. You just wondered what was going to happen. But once you were actually in the aircraft, engines started it, then you were more focused. You had to check whatever you were doing, you see. Now, as far as the engineer was concerned, we assisted the pilot on takeoff and land. I got on extremely well with my crew. The gunners were, a little bit older, but not much. The navigators a couple of years older, and the pilot was about 5 or 6 years older. It was all Christian names, by the way. Far less bullshit than the RAF itself, And yet, they didn't let you get away with anything, because on one of the raids, we were approaching the target, and I said to the skipper, we should be there in 2 or 3 minutes. He said, so I see the flares go down, but navigator said, Jesus Christ, he said, I'm on the wrong chain. We're 30 miles south of track. There was nothing for it. We just had to press on, as it were. And we flew over Mönchengladbach, which was a German artillery school. And we were a lone aircraft. I've never seen so much flak in my life. It was above us, below us, to the side of us, but apparently unscathed. I didn't realise that we were hit at all. Anyway, we managed to drop the bombs and came home. But we got a bollocking actually for being late over target, and we had to do 3 8-hour cross countries to make sure our navigation was scratched actually. So, as I say, although I was fairly lenient as far as discipline was concerned, anything to do with flying, there had to be definite.
The flight path would take the plane over German-occupied Netherlands. Most significantly, it would pass close to the Luftwaffe airbase Fliegerhorst Lohwarden. This was the home of a squadron of Messerschmitt Bf-110s, the Nachtjagdgeschwader 1, or night fighters. One of the squadron's fighter pilots was fast winning a reputation as an ace flyer. Leopold Poldi Fellerer was just 22, yet had already achieved propaganda fame for his remarkable success in shooting down British bombers making their way to raid Germany's industrial heartland.
Im Morgengrauen des 21. Januar landet dritter Kreuzträger Hauptmann Fellerer, der innerhalb weniger Stunden 5 Abschüsse erzielte. Allein in 2 Januarnächten vernichteten unsere Nachtjäger mehr als 99 Terrorbomber bei zum Teil ungünstigstem Abwehrwetter. Da schmeckt die Zigarre. Ein heikles Ding, so ein Mikrofon.
On Sunday the 12th of October, 5 air crews based at Middleton St George were briefed on their operations for the night. In the early evening, the crews mustered and at 18:38 made their way out to be transported to their aircraft. At 18:55, the squadron leader entered the portable outward control tower positioned beside the runway to supervise takeoff.
Hello control, path calling. Are you receiving me? Over.
Hello, flare path. Control answering. I am receiving you well. Over.
The crews boarded their aircraft and began final checks. They took off at 19:35. Halifax L9561 was on its way.
C for Charlie, airborne, sir. 19 hours, 35 minutes.
Hello, control. Pass out. C Charlie took off 1935. Over.
At Bomber Command Centre, outgoing flights were plotted as they crossed the North Sea. Four of the 5 aircraft from Middleton St George were heading to the Siemens factories in Nuremberg, whilst one was to join bombers from other bases headed for Bremen. That aircraft was Halifax L9561. As the plane flew low over the sea, it approached the Frisian Islands, dotted along the western coast of the Netherlands. There it was picked up by one of the dense network of radar stations that the Germans had built along the coast. The Luftwaffe's Tiger radar station was sighted in Terschelling, one of the West Frisian Islands. Not far away at Leeuwarden, pilot Poldi Fellerer and Georg Lotz, his radio operator and gunner, were ordered to scramble in preparation for the approaching British attack. At 2016, Fellerer was airborne and searching the skies. 27 minutes later, he received information from Leutnant Schulze at Tiger Station. An enemy bomber had been spotted incoming at a height of 3,200 meters. After a few minutes circling, Fellerer spotted Halifax L9561. As he later reported, the enemy was up ahead and slightly above us. I had to brake sharply so as to remain behind. I positioned myself around 200 meters below the aircraft, slightly to the right. I climbed steeply to the left and aimed my gun at the enemy's left side, close to the engines. The Halifax began to burn. As fire raged, one of the Halifax's port engines failed. Realizing the plane could not be saved, pilot Elmer Muttart ordered his crew to bail out. Six got out okay, but tail gunner John Duffield had suffered serious injury from bullets and shrapnel. Struggling to escape his narrow gun turret, his leg got stuck. In desperation, he pulled on his parachute ripcord before falling unconscious. By a miracle, he was pulled free. Only Elmer Muttart remained, still piloting the burning plane. Briefly losing sight of his prey in the clouds, Fellerer swung his fighter round, circled, and saw the stricken Halifax 500 meters ahead. He opened fire again, this time on its starboard side, and, in his own words, it began to blaze fiercely. But Muttart was not giving up the fight. As Fellerer reported, I squeezed underneath the enemy and he appeared to be attempting to ram us. But the Halifax had lost so much height it was too late for Muttart to use his parachute. What's more, seeing the danger of crashing into the houses below, he continued, steering the plane away from the village of Vorsch. Crashing in open farmland. His heroism cost him his life. As an eyewitness described later, people who witnessed this event that evening, and there were many, stated Vorsch was spared disaster. After their capture and interrogation by the Germans, all 7 surviving crew members were transferred to prisoner of war camps. From that day, they had to suffer long years of hardship, tedium, harsh discipline, forced marching and near starvation until they were freed in April 1945. 78 years after the tragedy in which Elmer Muttart lost his life, the last flight of Halifax L9561 received the commemoration it deserved. In Friesland, the Stichting Missing Airmen Memorial Foundation combined forces with the On the War Memorial Trail Research Project in Canada to commission an information panel describing the events of that night. On the 12th of October 2019, Peter Valkenburg, a Dutchman now living in Canada whose research drove so much interest in the tragedy, joined with the families of the crew, dignitaries and local historians to unveil the plaque near to the crash site.
Welcome to this ceremony. We will start with unveiling the information panel. Yes. Take it down slowly, please, because everyone wants to make a picture. Let's go. There will be time afterwards, of course, to look at the panel.
Serving members of the Canadian and Royal Air Forces, along with representatives of the Canadian Legion, paid their respects to the airmen of Halifax L9561 and their heroic skipper, Sgt Elmer Muttart. Families and friends of the crew of Halifax L9561 gathered at the General Cemetery of Harlem to honour their loved ones and pay their respects at the graveside of Sgt Elmer Muttart.
Yes, great. Thank you. We have 1 minute of silence starting from now.
very proper man. He was very polite. Manners and the way people would behave were very important to him. He always used to open doors for ladies, and when we were out shopping, if he was first to the door and there was a lady there, he always opened it for her. If he walked down the pavement, he walked nearest the cars to protect the woman and things like that. But he had a tremendous sense of humour. He was a very witty man. He enjoyed having fun. He was a sportsman. He was a very, very fit man. He loved the RAF. Before he flew in the Halifax as an engineer, he did have his wings, but he was caught by the CO doing some, I don't know exactly what he was doing, but low flying, and yeah, so he lost his wings and carried on as an engineer. He got to squadron leader. He retired at 55, but he missed it, and his final job, which he really loved, he was the director of the Royal Medical Benevolent Fund, and he really loved that.
Well, my father didn't talk very much at all about his experiences in the war, both as an airman and as a prisoner of war. And I think actually the events of that night had a very serious effect on the rest of his life. And his brothers said when he came back from the war camps, he was a lot quieter, a lot more reticent, a bit more careful with authority. So it did have, I think, sort of traumatic effect on his life. He was a very happy man, very happily married, had a very happy family. But I think the experience of being shot down and then captured had a very serious effect on his happiness and his demeanour and his confidence. How traumatic that night must have been. Being in the air, being shot at, all that drama, all that noise, and then being shot down, having to jump into the unknown, having never jumped from an aeroplane before. It's just an extraordinary thing to have gone through. And then to be captured and then have a significant part of his young life in prison. His personality changed because of the stress of that time.
My sister and I have been really touched and pleased to come here to the Netherlands this weekend for the memorial that we've all placed for the whole crew of that plane which crashed near Wands.
What was your dad like? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's been really interesting to meet other children of crew members, because I think we all found that our fathers were very strongly disciplined and proper, and that they expected that of us as well. And it's been really interesting to share that experience with others. He was a man of great integrity, and I suppose now I discover courage like the rest of the crew. And he expected that integrity from his children as well. And I hope Carolyn and I didn't disappoint him too much. I've talked to the families spoke much about their experiences during the war, and as we've learnt more about what those were, that's perhaps not very surprising. Something they needed to leave behind, apart from the comradeship and honour that they all served together with.
My name is Don Coots. It's my uncle, Elmer Muttart, that was flying the Halifax bomber back in October 12th, 1941. Fortunately, he was killed that night, and I was not born until 9 years later. His sister is my mother, Helen Muttart Coots, and we knew as a family, Elmer had been a pilot in World War II and had been shot down, but there was not much talked about in the family at that time. I think the wounds were still fresh to my grandparents that we would visit down in Prince Edward Island. We were on the understanding at least that Elmer's plane was shot down on a return trip back from Germany from bombing, but it was actually the plane was shot down as it was heading to Germany on a bombing mission. My mother did have some material, a letter explaining what had happened, and he talked about how Uncle Elmer went down, made sure the plane was safe, and had, last he saw it was avoiding the community. Shortly after October 12th, they got a cablegram initially saying that he had been missing in action, and then received the official cablegram on December 31st, 1941, that he had been killed and had been buried with military honors in the Harlequin General Cemetery on October 16th, 1941.